Hello and welcome to Business Finishing School. Let your business brain finish what your entrepreneurial heart started. Our catalyzing statement is a successful entrepreneur inside of every business. Enjoy this module.
Hello and welcome to Module 39, Keystone Habits. I'm sitting here with Patrick and I am excited to talk about this topic, mainly because of what it leads to. And we decided in our group to focus on Keystone Habits because we all read a book called The Power of Habit, and it's the one by Charles Duhigg. And the reason I brought up his name is because there's many books on habits and power of habit and all of that. This one is incredible because it's so easy to put on the ground. A lot of the books on habits, they talk about habits from a perspective that's harder to implement, whereas this one is very easy because where he lands on the topic is keystone habits. So I'm going to let Patrick talk to you about what a keystone habit is, and we could start giving you some examples. And before I pass it to Patrick, though, I do want to say that many of you will call me and say, how does keystone habit relate to legacy? Yeah,
It's everything.
It's everything, because you think about, for example, one of my favorite writers is Maya Angelou, and Maya had a habit. She said, I couldn't really produce my writings unless I checked myself into a hotel room at 5 a.m. She had this ritual where if she knew she was writing a book, she would check herself into a hotel room at 5 a.m. and she would write until 2 p.m. and then she would go home. And she would alternate various different hotels, but the staffs at the hotels knew she was coming. They knew what food she liked, and she would just hole up in there. But that's a keystone habit. That is something that, had she not done that, she would not be the famous writer that she is. And in last month's module, we talked about people will rarely remember what you said, but they will always remember how you felt in their presence. Well, Maya is the first one that coined that phrase. Let me pass it on to you, Pat.
Here's the interesting thing here. We certainly have spent a lot of time in this program, especially in year one, talking about the importance of habit and ritual, right? I mean, the principle 3 is rhythms and rituals to amplify time and success. And that has been a transformative thing for me and my experience. Especially, I am not naturally a structured person. I'm somebody who was the opposite of structure. I'm more on the creative side, etc. So creating rhythms and rituals has had profound impact on making me freer and more effective. And we don't need to reiterate all of that because we taught it in year one. But here is I think the genius in the keystone habit concept and in the book that Charles Duhigg wrote. Keystone habits are these kind of high leverage habits that are almost unsuspecting or off the radar. And we'll talk deeper about this in a few moments. But what do we mean by this? I could right now open up my calendar and I can show you dozens of habits that are my weekly rituals that I do rhythmically over and over and over again. However, keystone habits are those 1 or 2 habits that profoundly change everything, and they typically do it in this sort of, how can I put it, unsuspecting way. I kind of characterize it this way. They don't really talk about it this way in the book, but my take on it is it's like you see 1,000 dominoes fall. The keystone habit is the one domino that fell to get the whole thing started. And you can't see it. It's around a corner, it's down a hill, it's somewhere else. You don't really even see it. And unless you were the guy who set up all the dominoes, you wouldn't know that that thing even existed. So for this, we start to look at keystone habits as these kind of pivotal things that have what I would call unsuspected outcomes. Unless you're a keystone habit master, then you know exactly what you're doing. So the book talks about several examples, but I think the one that's most poignant is the Alcoa story. And we brought this to our accountability group. Rick, I think it was an exercise that you gave out, and we wanted to talk about the Alcoa story, which is what caused me to go out and get the book and read it and read about the Alcoa story.
Let me just give a little bit of background. You can tell the story.
Okay.
He was an outsider from the aluminum industry, and he came in and he didn't have the look of the normal CEO. He didn't have the experience of the normal CEO.
Government. He was a government guy.
He was a government guy. And the shareholders, especially the institutional shareholders, rejected him because he didn't say the things that they normally expect a CEO to say at shareholder meetings. Things around profit growth, things around increasing revenue, things about opening more facilities around the world. So I'll leave it there, Pat, and send it back to you.
It just came to me. His name is Paul O'Neill. And what you said is exactly true. Paul O'Neill came from the government. He was working in the current administration. He had success there, but he's a bureaucrat, a government bureaucrat. So pretty much in the business world, especially the other CEOs, they look at government bureaucrats as kind of I don't want to say second-class citizens, but people who are funded and are not accountable in the way that businesses are. They're funded through taxes and they're accountable to good intentions, not outcomes. Whereas a real CEO is accountable to their outcomes. So bottom line is that Alcoa was floundering. Alcoa was once one of the greatest companies in the world. And it was floundering. Its stock price had pulled back. It was losing market share. It was becoming irrelevant. All kinds of bad things. It looked like it was on the skids, basically, and it was just in this death spiral that, given the magnitude of the company, it would still take a long time before it might expire. But bottom line was, this once great company was now looking pretty grim, and it was kind of a story for the business world on how things go bad, how a great company goes bad. So they bring in this guy, Paul O'Neill. And I think this story is so poignant. And so if you're listening, this is the time, if you're distracted, to not be distracted, because we're going to make a point here that I think is going to be important as far as this whole module goes. So it's now time for the big meeting. It's pretty much a traditional thing when a new CEO comes into a big public company, that they're going to have this event, and they invite the press, they invite the bankers on Wall Street, they invite all the important people to come in, and the new CEO is going to come in and talk about his vision for the company, how he's going to turn things around, what he's going to make happen. It's his time to get up there and shine and kind of impress people with their wit and their wisdom and their vision and their energy and all those kinds of great things. It's fresh legs coming into the game. So you got this, set this up, you've got this company that's in a bad place. You got a lot of people invested in it. It's a public stock. You got all the people now who are the bloggers and the journalists, that cover Wall Street, who have to write about it. You've got the people who are the investors, who are going to decide whether or not they're going to tell their people to put their money into this company or not. So it's an important day. Paul O'Neill gets up in front of the group, and rather than go through the normal rituals that the new CEO will do, and kind of the cute little joke that they'll tell in the beginning, and kind of the talking about his days back in Ivy League school and whatever it might be, he just got up in front of the group basically and said, "We are going to focus on one thing at Alcoa, and that one thing that we're going to focus on is employee safety." And he elaborated on that a little bit, and then he said, "Okay, we'll take questions." And somebody raised their hand and said, "Well, talk to us about how you're going to increase your market share. You've lost a bunch of market share to foreign companies, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera." He said, "I'm not sure that you heard me correctly. We're not going to focus on that. We're going to focus on our employee safety." And well, wait a minute. What about revenue? What are you going to be doing to focus on revenue and growing Alcoa's revenue? The revenue is pulled back. His response, again, I'm paraphrasing, "I'm not sure you heard me correctly. We're going to focus on one thing, employee safety." Well, wait a minute. What about your earnings per share? It's been down. The stock price has taken a hit. You got people to answer to out here. These people put money into this company. It's a public stock. Well, I'm not sure that you heard me. We're going to be talking about and focusing on employee safety. So you can imagine the room is sitting there perplexed saying, see, this is what happens when you hire somebody from the government. They want to be do-gooders. They're going to focus on employee safety. In the meantime, they're losing market share. Their revenue is down. Their earnings per share is down. And this guy is not even addressing it. He's talking about employee safety.
And here's why it's called the Keystone habit. He decided to make safety the number one habit of the company. And why is Charles calling it a Keystone habit, and why are we deciding to do a module about it? Because the Keystone habit changes the game for everything else. I love that analogy. It's the first domino. Here's why. He decided to go out to Alcoa's 180 plants around the world and inform the managers in those plants that anytime someone is hurt for any reason, call me at home, any time of the night.
24/7.
24/7. And what happened was they started having some injuries. And the 180 plants would report it into him. He reported back out to everyone. And it forced the company, because they wanted to over-communicate, forced the company to, at the time, have the most advanced email system.
And communications.
And communications, which didn't exist at that time. This was now over 2 decades ago. And so it was prior to email being a normal thing. But what it did even more is it forced over communication. It forced people to share best practices. It forced managers to work with each other to say, well, what are you doing at your plant? We're doing this at our plant. It got the employees to realize that, holy cow, they're focused on us. Because most industrial companies at the time, they would just treat casualties of employees as just the cost of doing business. So all of these amazing things happen.
There's one other thing I want to add that's in line with that. And this was the genius. Paul O'Neill walked in. It wasn't an accident that it turned out that Alcoa had a record run on Wall Street, that the return, even compared to the tech companies of today, that if you bought an Alcoa stock right before he took his tenure as CEO and cashed it in when he left, whatever many years, not that many years later, 8 years or something like that, that the amount of return you got on that dollar for every dollar stock you bought was unprecedented, I think, even to this very day. So, their profits everything went up. And why? Because of a single Keystone habit. But what did Paul O'Neill know, and why was this guy an unusual genius? He walked into a situation where the company was completely dysfunctional. It was in this very bad state. There was angst between the management and the employees. So if he tried to grow profit, grow top line, et cetera, the employees would not get behind that. If he tried to do something that was exclusively kind of employee and union based or what have you, then the management would kind of rebel. How do you get it together? He said, what's the one thing I can get everybody on the same page with that can start creating new habits, that can break the patterns? What he recognized is he had a corrupt culture. He had to break the patterns of that culture to have any chance at transcending the challenges that they had. So what he did is he found one thing, that what manager is going to speak against employee safety? What employee would be against employee safety? So it was a way to get everybody on the same page, rallying around a single habit. And the idea was, okay, managers said, yes, we want to improve that. Employees said, yeah, you care about our safety. This is wonderful. It caused increased communication. It caused sharing of best practice. So what do you think happened when they set up this infrastructure of communications to, that he mandated? And I mean, when I talk about mandated, if anybody failed, any manager, they told some of the stories, guys who've been there for 10, 15, 20 years, whatever, if they failed to follow the protocol on reporting an incident, a safety incident, in the time frame that it was mandated, they were fired. It was without prejudice. It was, you're terminated. I don't care what you've done, how long you've been here. This is our number one priority. It will not be violated, and we mean it. So what happens? Well, because now they're all set up with these communications to share best practices. What do you think happened? That maybe there wasn't a employee safety issue between plants, but some plant found some other way to increase productivity. They started sharing their information in other ways as a result of the profound impact on that company and its meteoric rise. It's kind of like a phoenix coming out of the ashes back. It was amazing. So the point here, which I think is so important, and this is why I want you to understand Keystone habits. This is a perfect example of a unsuspected or unsuspecting habit that you might say is a nice thing, but can profoundly change or did profoundly change things that were considered unrelated. You would never think, just like at the beginning, that employee safety was going to translate into unprecedented profits for a company. It was about the employees. It's not about production. It's about just keeping employees safe. So that's a Keystone habit. So the question is, what Keystone habits can you think of that might radically change your business, change your life?
Let me throw some at you to change the way you're looking at this, maybe some personal examples, and then talk about an issue with a close friend of mine. In the book, they talk about people that are dealing with depression and issues in their life, and they start working out first thing in the morning and making a workout a Keystone habit. And you know the end of the story. Everything changed in their life. You know that there's two options if you're in a depression. You can go the medical route and get over-medicated, or you can release a lot of hormones from good regular workouts. So that could become a Keystone habit. For me in my life, I've got young children, and I noticed the kids were unruly. And so I decided now, it's been a long time ago, but come hell or high water, no matter what my travel schedule was, no matter what my business schedule was, I was demanding that the family, all of us, get together every night for family dinner. And I committed to 6 nights a week. And we were so faithful, and still are faithful to that commitment, that as long as I'm in town, even if I have a client dinner or we have date night, I will come home at 5:30, help set the table with the children, bring interesting conversations to talk about, have the family dinner placemat out, and have a thoughtful conversation over dinner with my family. And it has changed everything. It's improved my marriage. It's improved how my children communicate with each other. It's changed how they interact with electronics. It's changed their frustration level. It's helped them become better communicators. It's helped them have more gratitude. They help setting the table, preparing the food, cleaning. So it's helped them with their chores. It's changed everything. So family dinners for me and my family have become a Keystone habit. Another Keystone habit, which I want to now flip back to the business side.
Incidentally, I want to just point out, because we're talking about legacy, how you realize that Keystone habit with your children is going to completely impact their relationships, their marriages, everything into their future because of the habit that they have now as kids. Because that's what happened for you too. You had, so you're basically, paying this one forward. You had the experience as a child. Now you're giving that experience to your children. It vertically affects. So this is how, I think a perfect example I didn't want to go by, to say how a Keystone habit, like just having dinner with the family, affects legacy, because it's going to affect your children's future and their grandchildren, etc. It's something that pays forward.
Yeah, and thanks for pointing that out. We talked about that last month, or actually 2 months ago now. Another thing, it's 2 more quick examples to get your mind going, and I know, Pat, you're going to want to springboard over this, and then I want to talk about a negative example. We talked about in the past the Charles Wiley card.
Right.
As a Keystone habit. Here's a guy that sold 6 companies for more than $1 billion in profit.
Each.
Yeah. And, when he bought a company or invested in a business or started a business, he had a Keystone habit that all of the employees in the business had a card in their pocket that had the company's objectives and the employees' objectives. And we've implemented that in our company. So it's the company's quarterly objectives. What does the company need to get done? And then the employees' quarterly objectives. What do they need to get done in order to get bonused? And I'm sure that changes the conversation in hallways. It changes the accountability. Just like when you talked about the Alcoa story, when people know that safety is the biggest concern, they're going to focus on it. If people know that objectives are the biggest concern, they're going to focus on it. And so that's another keystone habit. And then I'm thinking of my friend Warren Rustand, who has a keystone habit of getting up every single day at 5 a.m. and meditating, then writing in his journal about what he's grateful for, and then doing a workout as a keystone ritual every morning. Now, you and I both know that would change everything. But the negative example is a conversation that you and I talked about for over an hour the other day, Patrick, and that is I've got a close friend who's about 48 years old. He's massively obese, very, very intelligent person, very successful person. He's got 2 young kids under 10. He's about 5'10" and weighs 425 pounds. And of course, the health issues are coming at him radically. The diabetes, the onset of symptoms of MS, pain in his joints. He has to wear a mask when he sleeps at night, and because of what do they call that breathing?
Apnea?
Sleep apnea. Mm-hmm. And I care about him. He's a close friend. My kids love his kids. Our families do holidays together. And you look him in the eye and you say, if you don't create a keystone habit about health and fitness, you will be dead. And he won't do it. He absolutely won't do it. But here's the thing about this. That is an example that you can see. You can see it because of the obesity and the sickness that's overwhelmed this person. But that happens in societies, that happens in governments, that happens in companies, that happens in nonprofits. Is this thing that's growing and manifesting because we're not willing to put in place keystone habits that will change everything. And I want you to know that we're doing this program because we want you to change. But we can't do that. We're sitting here in a recording session and you're sitting somewhere else. We can't do it unless you want to do it and unless you put the accountability around it. So please put keystone habits down, put rhythms around them, inform your accountability partners and your spouse about what you plan on doing, and get some buy-in from them, and ask them with an open mind, an open heart, and an empty cup to help you implement this.
And remember, the keystone habits are kind of the foundational or the fulcrum habits that the other ones rest on. So to just try to give more context to this, I want to differentiate a keystone habit from what I might call a regular habit. For example, if you're somebody like myself or Rick, and you've been in this program, so hopefully it's true, you've adopted the premise or the principle of rhythms and rituals that amplify time and success. So you got lots of habits that you put into your calendar, and hopefully you're revisiting and you're upgrading and monitoring and modifying, etc. The keystone habit is the fact that you set rhythms. From that, you have all these other habits. Like, for example, working out in the morning, dinner with your spouse every week, or date night, or whatever your regular meeting rituals or rhythms or habits might be within your organization, etc. You have all these things, but what is the keystone habit that transforms so you create all these other ones? The fact that you set rhythms. Setting the rhythm is the keystone habit that changes your health and fitness, that changes your relationship, that changes your savings or your financial wealth and abundance, that changes your company structure, and et cetera, et cetera. So I would look at is date night an important habit? Sure. But I don't call it a keystone habit, not at least for me. Is it a critical one? Yes, I've been doing it for years and it's been transformative. Is working out every day, an important habit? Yes. Are my eating habits an important habit? Yes. And I can make an argument to a degree that they're keystone habits, each of them, because I can show the far-reaching effects. But they're all habits that are in my calendar, in my rituals. But the keystone habit that makes them all happen is the fact that I'm a habit creator. And the fact that I'm a habit creator is my keystone habit. So now with that, you might say, well, wait a minute, I just listened to last month, and last month was on curiosity, and curiosity was about being stuck in your old, your old patterns and wanting to create new ones. So, is there a paradox or a contradiction there? The answer is you make curiosity a part of your habits. Curiosity by itself could be a keystone habit that you literally habitually stay curious. It sounds somewhat paradoxical, but the reality is when you are solving paradoxes is when you're growing into mastery. Isn't that the way things are? It's like things that seemingly were conflicting or contradictory, you step back and take a wider view and start to recognize how you turn them into something that is that you integrate, and that's where mastery is.
Now, one thing you're bringing up for me, Patrick, right now is that so often you and I get into conversations with people, and we're not really distinguishing it the way we're going to distinguish it right now, but I believe most people subconsciously go through life waiting for a great event to happen. Mm-hmm. Almost like buying a winning lottery ticket.
Yeah, waiting for the lottery ticket.
Yeah. Or, maybe someone will buy my company for a lot of money, or maybe I'll have a business meeting where someone, creates a deal for me. And they're event-driven. Mm-hmm. It's just like we were talking about as it relates to accountability groups, where you get people on accountability groups who say, I didn't get anything this week, so I'm quitting the group. Or I didn't get anything last month, so I'm quitting the group. That's an event-driven mentality, whereas you're waiting for something magical to happen. But the ironic thing is, when you put Keystone habits in place, when you have rhythms and rituals, when you commit to putting the stuff we're teaching you on the ground, that's where the magic comes. And you never know when it's going to come. Mm-hmm. But it will come. We're living proof. The people in the program are living proof. So you've got to subconsciously get out of the event-driven game. That is a mind screwer. That will mess you up. It's all about creating the life that you love, the life that you want, the life that makes you happy, the life that makes you feel fulfilled. And it's all around putting rhythms and rituals in place around these habits, rhythms and rituals around the things that will give you long-term benefit, like health and fitness and workouts and date night and dates with your kids, etc.
Well, I think ultimately we are literally our habits. Our character is dictated by them. I forget the exact Aristotle quote, but he said, "We are not virtuous, and therefore we act. We act, and therefore we are virtuous." And I think that's exactly what Aristotle was talking about. And I think if you really want to dig into this subject, which is an important one, one of the recommendations is to read the book, The Power of Habit, and it will immerse you into this world in a deeper way. And I have to tell you, it's not like it's a thrilling read. It's not like it's it's a thrill ride and it's exciting and stimulating, but it is powerful, and it is something that I believe has significant implications into the entrepreneur's life, and ultimately why we're here again in year 4. All the time we spent together, we're creating this legacy. And it's your legacy that we're talking about here. How you're going to live beyond, your business. How you're going to live beyond your years on this planet. That's what this is all about. So, I think Keystone Habits. There's a big lesson to learn there, and I would ask yourself the question, kind of as at least my closing statement before I let Rick take us home. My closing statement on this, or my closing recommendation on this, would be this. I am convinced, as you're listening to the sound of my voice, I'm convinced that there is a habit for you that would be seemingly unimpressive, if you will, but would transform your life, transform your outcomes, impact your legacy in a significant way. It might seem like a mundane habit like employee safety, but it's there waiting for you to consider it. So if you were to take some quiet time away and to start think about what is it, and you can focus on the area of your life that might be most important, and quite frankly might affect multiple areas of your life, and just say, what is the habit I could start today that would be that first domino to fall, that would go affect all these other things? in a somewhat unsuspecting way. If you open yourself up to that, I think you'll find it.
That analogy is so beautiful. I'm going to say that from now on. I just love it. The first domino. What is the first domino in your personal life? What is the first domino in your health and fitness? What is the first domino in your career? What is the first domino in that project that you have been hesitant to start? I realize as I'm sitting here with Patrick that you are drinking through a fire hose, and you have been the last 4 years, but it's very important that you focus on simplicity, probability, and leverage as your lens to make decisions, and that you put this stuff on the ground. I don't have to look any further than from the time I met you and your wife, Patrick, and you met me and my wife, to see the amount of change that we have both, all four of us have endured is shocking. And yet, I recently read in a book that the average person changes at a maximum of 1 to 2% in a decade. Even those who put a lot of time on it, even those who put a lot of time into it, but the distinction, the ones that change a lot, which is such a tiny, tiny, minute percentage, are the ones that make a commitment and never look back. And they do the things that we're teaching you in this program. So stay committed to change. Put this stuff on the ground. Do the homework in your implementation guide, and thanks for listening to Keystone Habits.
Let your business brain finish what your entrepreneurial heart started.